Hello, everyone, and welcome to our conversation on youth violence prevention. My name is Justin Heinze, and I am joined today by two members of the National Center for School Safety, Dr. Brianna Scott, who is a postdoctoral research associate with the center, and Melissa Chavez, who is a school safety specialist. We're here to talk about why it's so important to empower students in school safety efforts, not just listening to their voices, but actually including them as partners in prevention. So I'm excited to bring two different perspectives together, one from more of a research side, one of a more practice side, and we'll see how those two perspectives can interact to inform how we approach school safety, and in particular, how do we engage youth in those efforts. So let's just start with a general question about why it's important to involve student voices in violence prevention. And Brianna, why don't I start with you?
Sure. So when we think about school environments, students are the experts of their own experiences of what it means to be a student in a school setting. So students are going to be able to provide perspectives that an adult or educator or principal or an adult in the school might not know as to be as accurate or as truthful as a student. So students are often going to have ideas that an adult may not come up with when it comes to preventing youth violence in a school space. And another reason is that when students are included in youth violence prevention in schools, they're more likely to feel heard and feel as though they belong to the school space. They're more likely to feel like their ideas matter, that their experience matters, and they're more likely to feel like they belong in their school community.
Melissa, you're working with schools around the country. You heard belonging. That's an important part here. Having students feel like their voices is heard. Do you agree? Is that something that you've seen in your work?
Yeah, absolutely. I've worked with schools across the country, and the places where school safety efforts really work, it's truly where the ones where students are actively involved. And we know that student engagement ensures that students' and needs and their priorities are reflected in our school safety strategies. And when students feel heard, when they feel valued, they're also more likely to engage in solutions and report concerns. And the research shows that student involvement does strengthen that trust between the students and the adults, which then, leads to better communication and intervention opportunities. And, we can ask ourselves, what would happen if student voices aren't considered? And things that we can see show up would be like missed signs, missed warning signs. You get disengagement. And then truly, it's just a lack of trust in the school systems that can lead to.
Okay, when you said missed signs, missed warning signs, what are you sort of thinking about? What are some of the things that might students might show that others might pick up on or not pick up on?
Yeah, so if there's students that might, if there's signs of maybe risk of something happening, maybe something being wrong, you missed warning signs of um, maybe they're thinking about having problems at homes, and you don't realize that the students might be showing signs of either isolation or signs of feeling like they're voicing that they're not being heard. There maybe signs of bullying. You see these different trends among students, but you might be missing those signs if you're not engaging and listening to them and making them feel like they're being heard.
Got it. And Brianna, I'm curious, does the research sort of support this idea of being able to recognize signs or recognize bullying that might be happening, isolation?
Absolutely. One of the most prominent warning signs for violence perpetration in schools is social isolation. When students are feeling isolated or ostracized from their school community, they're more likely to perpetrate violence, whether that be a mass school tragedy event or bullying perpetration. And so that's one of the reasons it's so important to include students in safety efforts and also just the school climate in school community more largely is um, to prevent kind of those violent occurrences from happening and also just improve student self-esteem and mental health.
Got it. Well, it's interesting to see some of these social relationships playing out potentially in violent situations later on. So it's a important part of prevention. So then, Melissa, you mentioned the importance of developing trust in relationships. I'm wondering, have you seen examples where schools have been successful at pulling students into their programming?
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen some great examples that schools have been using, things like developing student advisory councils, youth advisory committees, where students can share their perspectives and perceptions about school safety and what it means to be connected with their schools. The use of student ambassador programs, where you get representatives from your student body. They get invited to maybe these meetings of the school safety teams, and they can really share the insights about what's happening in the schools, the concerns they have, ongoing issues, any gaps, and even blind spots that maybe the adults are missing. And this can really help guide the decision making all across the board about programs and school safety strategies in the schools that you might already be thinking about implementing, and you just get that extra voice and perception from or perspective from the students.
Got it. Brianna, any examples that you've come across?
Sure. So, one example that comes to mind is the evidence-based after-school program called the Empowerment Solutions Program. It is an after-school program typically implemented with middle school age students, where the purpose of the program is to empower students to participate and lead in a community change project. So the students identify strengths and weaknesses in their school community and also their community more largely, and identify a project, something that would help improve their school community, bring people together, reduce violence, reduce bullying. And this is really student driven. So the students come up with the idea for the project, the students budget the costs and the materials that would needed to implement the project. And some examples of projects we've seen include things like basketball courts, school murals, even like musical programs, dinners and meals to bring the community together. And those are really important for youth to feel like, adults are taking their ideas seriously, and also to be really proud of an effort that they led to make their school and their community a better place.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's
Alex? Oh, please.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, no, I was just going to add on to that, kind of looking at it from the community lens. I've also seen, implementations of programs where schools will have trusted adults in the community that will mentor students. A practical example of that would be what's called the community violence interventors. And it's essentially just that. It's mentors in the community that engage with students in the schools. And these community violence interventors are trusted adults that live in the community. They know the kids, they understand what's going on outside of the school walls. And so they really can just connect and identify with the lived experiences of the students.
Wonderful. Well, I like hearing some of these examples. There are some that are happening in school. There are some that are happening outside of school time. There are some that are all about using folks that are within the school building. Others that are pulling in community members. So it's great to hear that there are different approaches that schools can take to meet their particular needs. So, Brianna, then I'm wondering. I mean, you've studied educators. Can you tell me where there might be some challenges or barriers for adults to engage youth and try to pull them into these different sorts of programs?
Yeah. So in that Youth Empowerment Solutions program that I mentioned, one of the subject areas that we focus a lot on is this idea of adultism, which is the idea that adults are superior to young people simply because they're older, they have more experience, and that there is this kind of culture of respect that young people need to obey and respect their elders, no matter what the circumstances. And I think that that's certainly a barrier of kind of this idea of adultism kind of embedded in culture and in school spaces to kind of maintain the status quo. And when we think about, challenging that idea of adultism and helping to reach kind of a shared control space where both adults and youth are sharing ideas and sharing control of school communities, can be really a fruitful mechanism for which we can make schools safer for everybody. And so kind of challenging that adultism culture is certainly one way to kind of overcome some of that.
Most of you seen that play out in the ground in any, or have you seen schools that were successful sort of overcoming this urge to be the more adults, separating the students and the adults in the building?
Yeah, so I think, yeah, I think it truly comes down to um, helping the students feel like we can voice, we can give feedback, we can give you our insights and feel heard. And I think it goes back to just that component of trust. And also, too, when I'm thinking about just challenges, because we know the reality is sometimes it is challenging to get students to participate in this engagement. And we've seen schools get really creative and do fun things like encouraging our students to participate in what it's called maybe like the student promotion contest, where you get like a group of students and whoever can promote their anonymous reporting system, and whoever can do that the most gets some type of prize. So just making it fun, creating that trusting environment, and yeah, making it feel like this is a collaboration. It's not just the adults speaking to the students, it's also like this bi-directional flow of information.
Interesting. Well, so we've seen lots and lots of research in the past, and truly part of our approach at the National Center for School Safety is to think about school climate and sense of belonging. So these are two sort of fundamental pieces that we think will help to drive, and promote safer schools. This idea of student empowerment and how that can support or lead to a positive school climate or a sense of belonging. Brianna, any thoughts about how those two are connected?
Yeah, so I think when students feel empowered, when they feel like their voice is heard, and when their voice is heard not just one time, and schools maybe check a box of, oh, we held a student focus group, and so we're including student voice, and then maybe it falls off the radar, but rather incorporating and embedding student voice and ideas and in the foundational structures of the way that the school operates is really important for school climate. It, helps include, cultivate a space where students feel like they belong and their ideas matter. And then the climate of the school is able to more accurately reflect the things that matter to students, things like friendships and maybe things like that are relevant in students' life. The school is able to maybe more accurately include those things in like the day-to-day school life. So um, yeah, I think they're very related.
Mhm.
Definitely. Yeah, I was just going to add on to that. The way that I've been thinking about that too is when you involve and allow this collaboration of students in violence prevention, it leads to like this two-way capacity building. And what I mean by that is, obviously when you involve student voice, you of course get leadership and decision makers that they learn about the insights that are happening through the lived experiences of our students. But then in return, through that, you also are creating this opportunity for students to gain leadership skills and communication skills through that collaborative exchange. And then they can then take that and apply it within their school environments, with their peers, or also take it out into the real world in the community. And I strongly feel that when students feel valued and included, when they find purpose and leadership and community, when they feel like that sense of belonging, it creates that stronger and more positive school climate.
Well, and that's I think that's really important, and it's a novel goal. I mean, but we're here talking about Violence Prevention Week. So most of you see a connection between that positive school climate, that belonging, and preventing violence within schools. It's something that I get asked a fair amount of time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that if students feel safe, that they're more engaged in learning, it's less likely to engage in any type of harmful behaviors.
Brianna, does that play out in some of the research that you've done or seen?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the areas that I see this in is with kind of extracurricular activities or after school programming. We know from the research that one of the most common times for youth to be involved in violence is maybe after school or kind of this outside of school hours. And so if there are extracurricular offerings or after school programming that students want to partake in, then um, they're engaging in structured time that is maybe observed, monitored by adults, and hopefully time that is helping them positively develop and that takes away other kind of out of school time that they may be more vulnerable to engaging in violence.
Yeah, yeah. And I often too get the question of like how can the adults, what can the adults do to engage students or to create this positive school climate in their schools? And there's very basic ways and accessible ways to do this. I think it's super important for adults, and I've seen this schools implementing it too, is just having like your principals, your assistant principals, your teachers being visible in the school building. I think sometimes we overlook that when, be visible the moment that kids walk into the schools every day, being visible in the hallways. Something as simple as saying hello or greeting a student by their name, a high five, a fist bump. That really goes a long way when it's coming from the adult. And being visible in the cafeteria, I think just all those spaces where kids are often in and sharing those spaces, it's just super important. And it has a really positive impact on the school climate.
Well, so we often or we rarely ever talk about a single strategy. We're almost always thinking about multiple strategies that sort of come together as a comprehensive school framework to prevent violence. Uh, Either of you, how do you see student empowerment fitting into that comprehensive school safety model?
I see student empowerment as being kind of woven through the comprehensive school safety model. When we think about the different school safety environments, taking the social environment, for example, um, offering programming where student empowerment is kind of at the forefront of programs like programs to reduce bullying or programs that increase students' problem solving and conflict resolution skills, um, empowering students to kind of gain those skills and to what Melissa said earlier, allowing them the opportunity to develop those leadership skills is really important and helps maybe promote that kind of social school environment, that school climate, that idea of student belonging. When you take the attentive environment, for example, and empower students through trainings or activities or both to utilize perhaps like an anonymous or confidential reporting system and empower students to utilize that system and ensure that there's trust in that their tips or their reports are going to be taken seriously, that can help facilitate a healthy, attentive environment in a school as well. So I think that those are just some examples of the ways in which student empowerment can be woven throughout the comprehensive model at all stages.
Melissa, what do you think? Does it fit into
Yeah,
a
no,
comprehensive school safety model?
yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think also too, I was thinking, we know that the research shows that when you have a trusted adult at a school, it truly contributes to the positive student mental health outcomes of the students. And sometimes when kids are coming to schools, the people that are surrounding them in the classroom and the hallways, sometimes it's the most consistent part of a child's day. So it just really has a ripple effect on all the different, strategies and best practices that we're seeing in the comprehensive school safety model.
So I guess my next question is, I have a couple teenagers at home and they don't seem to want to engage in anything. I'm curious, I mean, how can schools that are maybe facing some challenges getting students to get excited or to engage in some of these activities? Have you seen any strategies that have been successful in getting folks to participate? Melissa, start with you.
Yeah. So I think, there's the side of just getting creative and seeing what makes things fun, what makes things student led, and kind of taking that route. I think it's also important to, maybe understand from the beginning, why aren't students participating? Going back to hearing from them, why is this strategy or what we're doing this program just not fun or enticing to you? And then also, what are potential barriers? Like, is it just that the program itself is not fun for them, or is there something else that might be a potential barrier that is making it challenging for them to participate in it? And then also too, I think working with the students to generate those potential solutions instead of just having the adults be the only ones generating these solutions. Let's ask them, see what they come up with.
Think that a lot. Brianna, you had said earlier, and I thought that was a poignant point about you don't want this to be a one-off or to seem performative. Any suggestions as how you can demonstrate that investment and that it's not just going to be a one-time thing?
Yeah, I think scheduling structured time, whether that be once a week or once a month or twice a semester, or finding a timeline that works best. Every school is going to be different in terms of the resources that they have and the um, context of in which what interests the students. So I think finding a timeline that works for your school in terms of frequency of whether that be a student club or focus groups or, a time for students to get together and share their ideas. Maybe also offering like principal office hours for students to drop in, or I don't know, other methods of communication to really gain student input. And again, I think what's ultimately the most important is tailoring that to the needs and the context of each school community. What works in one school with one group of students may not work in another school with another group of students. And so, like Melissa said, I think talking to the students is really important, asking them what they want to see, what would work, what they think is going to be best, and then being flexible as a school leadership team is to show that that this really matters and to try to prioritize this as part of the school culture.
Well, and I'm curious, I know you both have thought about sort of the span of student development, and I think this is a challenge when we think about the balance between procuring student input and then the policies that might be selected, whether they're evidence-based policies, whether they're policies that are going to be supported by the district or parents. Where do you begin to sort of find that balance, particularly as you think about engaging younger students versus middle school students versus high school students? In terms of what they might suggest or what they might want to do and what the realities or the priorities for the schools might be.
I wonder if we could find like a middle ground between, what's feasible for a school administration and also what the students are asking for. I think that in order to sustain student voice in school safety efforts, you need to like acknowledge their ideas in some way or another. I think if they're feeling like their ideas are completely swept under the rug, then it's going to be challenging to maintain that trust as from a student perspective. So even if, there is some disagreement or dissonance between what the students are sharing and maybe what the is feasible from a school leadership team perspective. I think ideally maybe you'd be able to find a middle ground or a compromise. But if not, I think that it's still important to acknowledge the student ideas, even if they can't be implemented to the full extent as what students are asking for.
Melissa, anything you want to add?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with what Brianna was saying. I think sometimes it is difficult to hear what students want and what their reality is, and then what we might see at a more policy level. But I think schools can truly get creative. I know we talked about that earlier, but I think just being creative with how we can still follow what policies are in place, but still meeting the needs of the students. And like Brianna said, it's very dependent on the context, but I think the creativity can really go a long ways.
And I would perhaps challenge school leaders to push the needle on some policies and maybe on some local levels to kind of uplift student voice to say, hey, this is what we're hearing from the students is what's important to them. What does this look like, on a policy level or on a PTA school, like to kind of bring that to like a school board meeting or a PTA meeting to try to uplift some of those ideas so that school leaders are maybe serving as kind of advocates for students.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I know sometimes schools will implement or put together, like a coalition where different people from the community and parents will be a part of these groups. And I think, if we're hearing things at the school level with the students, having people from the school bring those to these meetings so that those voices can be heard there. And then see if, like you mentioned, maybe we can drive some type of policy change through that.
I think those are great points, and I think even the acknowledgement to students that their voices will be shared with, whether it's parents or school board or whomever, could be gratifying and make it feel as though the school is taking their requests very seriously.
Mhm.
Uh, Another thing that we're often talking to schools about is how to sustain activities. So you've made the investment, you want to show folks that it's not a one-time thing. You have students that are engaged. How do you keep that engagement going, particularly as you think about as students get older and graduate, and you have new students coming into buildings? Where are the mechanisms to sustain some of that involvement? Brianna, I want to start with you.
Again, I think embedding student voice as part of the school culture and maybe creating multiple modes of gathering those student voice and ideas, whether it be focus groups, after school programs, office hours, emails, offering kind of that multiple modality of communication to allow for as many students to participate in that. And then also just embedding kind of this within the norms of the school environment. Like Melissa was sharing earlier, for school leaders to like provide high five in the morning or having morning community minutes or something to kind of level set the day, just trying to infuse the school culture with student empowerment.
Totally agree with all that. And I know we alluded to it a little bit earlier, but super important, truly creating those ongoing structures where we have our student safety committees, if we have those developed when they're meeting regularly, embedding that the student input, every context is different, but just embedding it into your existing decision-making processes. I think also too, what's important important to sustainability is that trust and engagement over time. And I would say how we can accomplish that might be by implementing practices like transparency, core responsibility, those long-term relationships with our students. We talk about trust a lot, but also co-learning and emphasizing like what's the mutual benefit. It's not just the adults who are benefiting from this, but also what's the benefit to the students. And when I think about examples of what that might look like, example would be keeping students involved year after year, even as leadership and student populations change. Maybe offering opportunities for the younger kids to step into leadership roles when the older students graduate and just kind of creating those processes over time. And I think it's also very important to train and support your staff because they're also a very important and crucial part of this and for them to be able to work effectively with their student voices.
Appreciate those. All right. Well, we are running up against our time here, so I'm curious if you have some final takeaways to the folks that might be watching, whether you're thinking about takeaways for school staff, thinking about for community members, or for students. What would you like folks to know before we leave here?
Yeah, I'd say for school staff specifically, I really want to emphasize, the idea that students and their lived experiences, what's happening outside of just the school building, they really do have something just as valuable as, what you might be taught or read in an academic journal, or maybe what school leadership and adults believe might be the problems or the solutions to what's happening in the schools. Just the student voice really is valuable. And so, what I'd say is create those structured but flexible ways to share the input of your students.
Brianna, you were talking about after school programming. What would you tell those community members or those that are engaging?
Yeah, I would tell them to dream big, to hold on to your autonomy and know that you have autonomy when it comes to creating positive change in your school and your school community, and that your ideas matter. and that the work that educators and students are engaging in together to create positive change matters. And I think that there's a ripple effect as well when maybe people are working together towards a common goal. I think that that can be a really empowering thing. And there can be ripple effects from that to create positive change in communities more broadly.
Awesome. And if we happen to have any students watching this video, what would you tell them?
Yeah, I would say for students, I really want to emphasize that, your voice matters. The small actions that you do, like speaking up, supporting your peers, it truly can contribute to safer schools, and we want to hear from you.
So it sounds like if we are interested in creating that lasting change in school safety, we don't want to leave students on the sidelines. We're trying to pull them into everything we do. We saw that there could be programs related to the social environment, to the attentive environment, to the physical environment, in school, out of school, teachers, administrators, parents, community members. It really is a collective and collaborative effort. We thank you so much for your time. I thank you, Melissa. I thank you, Brianna, for sharing your expertise. And we are looking forward to a productive Violence Prevention Week. We hope to hear from you. Thank you for watching.